on the line with me right now is Professor Ben Agger. He's professor of sociology and director of the Center for Theory at the University of Texas at Arlington, uta.edu, of course, the website for the university. And he wrote a piece that Alternet renamed with the title, The Epic Food Fight Between Corporations and Americans Who Want to Eat Healthy, which raised in my mind the questions, what is Marxism and what is food capitalism? Professor Agger, welcome to the program.
Hey, Tom. I'm good. How about you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
I now realize which Thom Hartmann you are. You're the Thom Hartmann who helped me view myself as a hunter-gatherer and a hyper-focuser, not someone who is a bad boy who fidgeted in school.
Maybe you and I are both.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Well taken.
Anyhow, no, I don't think that either one of us were bad boys, although, fidgeting.
Well, bad is now good. So
my second grade teacher, Mrs. Clark, she used to say, Tom, an empty wagon always rattles, and even a fish wouldn't get caught if it kept its mouth shut.
Well, see, it stuck with you. You remembered her.
Yeah, she did. She was one of the best teachers I had, actually. She took me for who I was, even though she was constantly trying to shut me up.
Okay,
in your
piece, talk to you about food capitalism.
Yeah, let's get back to food capitalism. In your piece, you the piece talks about your experience with high fat and low carb diets and all this kind of stuff, and there's now this article that the New York Times published, and this recent study turns out it really wasn't that much of a study, and that most of the people on the high carb diet who saw increases in inflammation and weight were actually eating massive amounts of sugar and candies. It was just a horribly done study. But, setting that aside for the moment, in talking about this, there were a couple of things that I thought were really interesting, and I think the essence of it is in this sentence. You write, as a Marxist, I find it is easy to see that capitalism makes us sick with a standard Western diet of processed foods and abundant sweeteners for profit, and then heals us with various body industries also for profit.
Yes, I wrote a book a couple of years ago simply entitled Body Problems, and the subtitle is Running and Living Along in a Fast Food Society, where I tried to advance that argument, which is basically an empirical argument. Now,
go for it.
I want to hasten to add that Karl Marx, the great bearded one himself, extolled the virtues of capitalism, because it's not until we get capitalist mass production, according to Marx, now including the mass production of food, that we ever begin to deal with hunger. And also deprivation of a variety of kinds. So if you read the Communist Manifesto carefully, he would have heaped praise on Henry Ford and his era of mass production had he lived long enough.
Well, it's been probably 10 years, but the Communist Manifesto is fairly short. I've read that several times.
Indeed.
I only read Capital once, and I didn't read all of the book. I had to read it for coursework, but I don't recall that reference. I'm guessing it's probably there, but
it's throughout the oeuvre of Marx, the corpus of Marx's work.
Okay.
So the question is, what happens to food when food is sold for profit?
Right.
And the basic premise, which I think is relatively uncontroversial, is that food and diet and bodies themselves are both political and economic. Leaving Marx aside, second-wave feminism noticed this as early as the 1960s. And then I also reference what's a really foundational work by Susie Orbach from the 70s, coming out of so-called second-wave feminism, entitled Fat is a Feminist Issue.
Right.
So there are different ways of coming at this. After all of us eat, and many of us have problematic relationships to food. Mm-hmm. And my argument simply is you can't take that out of political and economic context, especially when you look at the power of a media culture that, in a sense, makes people hungry, especially young people, and makes potentially problematic diets and food nearly irresistible. So this has given birth to, the term I use, is a whole configuration of research, of studies, including theory, but a lot of empirical studies of the kind referenced in the New York Times piece, that I would loosely call critical food and exercise studies. And it's out of that context that I talk about the, quote, food fight between, if you will, veganism, which is anti-meat and anti-dairy to some extent, and both Atkins and Paleo, who identify not meat as the culprit, but rather carbohydrates.
Right.
And that's the point of departure. But I'm situating this in an earlier and larger context in which food can be viewed both as political and economic, as well as, of course, physiological.
Right, right. So, if we have an analysis that suggests that, we have this obesity epidemic in the United States. For years and years, we have not been at the top of longevity in the world, and arguably much of that comes from our processed food industries. How do we go from an analysis that shows that, there are some areas where capitalism, or at least unconstrained capitalism, or capitalism that has captured government agencies to its benefit, where it's getting huge subsidies and things like that, that this is not a healthy economically, politically, practically speaking, from society's point of view, this is not healthy. And of course, it's not healthy because it's not physically healthy for us. How do we go from an analysis to actually policy steps?
Well,
changing
policy
things.
Steps and also individual level steps.
Yeah.
Let's perform this thought experiment. Every American goes vegan, again, a term with which I'm uncomfortable, but basically moves away from the Western diet.
Right.
Every American does this by choice, perhaps prompted by policy recommendations. Simultaneously, every American, to the extent possible, gets sort of baseline 30 minutes of endurance exercise, whether it's elliptical or swimming or running or walking, 6 or 7 days a week. I predict, that would dramatically reduce the aggregate healthcare budget by many billions, and I'm certainly not alone in that. Well,
Finland has done this. Finland, saw that they had a heart disease and cancer problem some decades ago, and instituted a program nationwide to promote less meat in the diet, shall we say. They weren't actually promoting veganism, but less meat in the diet. Norway picked this up, and the army in Norway has what they call Meatless Mondays. They eat no meat on Mondays. In part, it was because of public health. In part, it was because meat is so intensive, so carbon intensive. A pound of meat represents 50 or 100 pounds of vegetables in terms of the carbon footprint.
Yes, and also I think Scandinavians, by and large, get more exercise than Americans of the aerobic kind.
Yeah, I think this is true all across Europe, by the way, having lived there for a year.
Epidemiological or large-scale health data certainly support the contention of sort of vegan-oriented doctors and other clinicians at the individual level who see remarkable, like the famous Esselstyn, Dr. Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic, reversals of heart disease by way of plant-based diets.
Yeah, this is the diet that Bill Clinton is on. There's an amazing website called nutritionfacts.org that is run by a physician who just is constantly laying out the latest medical research that supports this hypothesis that, particularly for anybody over 40, not being a vegan is almost a crazy thing.
That's really interesting, and it was also mainstreamed in the by now infamous CNN piece done by Dr. Gupta, Sanjay Gupta, on such issues, and focusing especially on Clinton and how he dealt with the aftermath of bypass surgery by forswearing meat and dairy. Yeah.
And I'm frankly of the opinion that dairy is probably far worse for us than meat, which is something that a lot of vegetarians don't want to hear. But I'm with the Japanese. They what is cheese? It's the curdled, rotted secretion of a giant mammary gland, on a larger mammal than us. Really?
Well,
anyhow, we're out of time, Professor.
Totally. And yet, many believe it's the only way to get calcium. Which
is nonsense. There's plenty of calcium in vegetables. Professor Ben Agar, I'm sorry we're out of time, sir, but thank you for being with us today.
Tom, call me anytime.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can read his work over at UTA.org and also on Alternet. It's called The Epic Food Fight Between Corporations and Americans Who Want to Eat Healthy. We'll be back.